Washington stands pat, makes no moves at the trade deadline. Just your reaction to them having a quiet day yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think prior to the Seattle game, it was a debate, winner. Even if they had lost the game, you could be like, well, they shouldn't necessarily be sellers because, there's still, a lot of the players here were part of the team from a year ago, and, they've had a lot of injuries, and maybe, they think, all right, we can turn this thing around. But then, of course, with Jaden getting hurt and a third consecutive loss by over 20 points, that, in my opinion, should have altered their view. That said, there was only so much they had to work with it. It was just some of their one-year guys like an Andrew Wiley, somebody like that. And if you look at the trades that were made over the last 24, 36 hours, it wasn't a lot of like trade a player in a 7th for a 6. It was the bigger names. So maybe there just wasn't a market for some of that stuff, or they just decided, what, none of this is worth it. We need to, the best thing we can do is get back on track the rest of the season, whether make the playoffs or not, and get ourselves into a better rhythm. And keeping the guys we want to have is helpful for that. So let's not worry. I'm okay with it, but I would have liked to have seen something get done, because even the most minimal of moves to help your draft capital for next year, I think, would be helpful.
But the thing of it is, what if they had people and they have this is the price to get rid of this guy? Somebody come in and want to go much lower than that. You want them to just make the move just to make it?
Well, I mean, look, I'm a believer that if you can increase your draft capital, even if it's something minimal, turning a 7th into a 6th, I think it's worth it. I mean, look, like, just to use Andrew Wiley as an example, because that was the one guy when I talked to people around the league that seemed to be interesting, because he's a versatile offensive lineman, and every single team needs offensive line depth.
Sure.
For the rest of this season, I'm not saying it couldn't use them, but, on the bench, you've got Brandon Coleman, Trent Scott, George Fant, Nick Allegretti. Like, that should be plenty if something were to happen. But like I said, moving up from a 7th to a 6th, you never know what happens. You get enough of these random picks, you package them together, and all of a sudden 3 of these things become a 4th, or you acquire somebody else or whatever. So I would have done some of it if it was just that. But if they were looking for more than, say, the 6th, if they're looking for a 4th or 2/5 or something, well, then sure, I get why, nobody wanted that, and maybe they were just being overly aggressive in that regard. So I don't know what the ultimate conversations were like. I would love to know if Adam Peters wants to dish. But, yeah, I would have, to some degree, I would have traded a lot of guys just for even a minimal of bump. I would have.
I think the most important thing yesterday is what they didn't do, honestly. And, like, Washington could have been in on Sauce Gardner. You know what I mean? Their secondary is getting killed. They're, like, they could have made a move to chase this season and been aggressive. And I almost wonder in the more modern era of the trade deadline, like if Bruce and Dan were still running the show, if they would have done something like that.
Yeah,
and to me, it's
big excited for nothing.
Yeah, like, to me, the most important thing is they didn't do anything stupid. Now, would you have liked to acquire some late-round draft capital? Because that's probably all you would have gotten. We're probably talking, picks 250 and beyond or whatever. Sure, but, like, for me, I've come in with a moderate level of disappointment. Like, I really don't think it's a big deal. And the most important thing is they didn't do anything dumb.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, Dallas at 3-5-1 made a pretty bold move, right, to get Quinnen Williams, and obviously he's a good player. But what are the chances that Dallas is going to be a player this season? Seems slim. I mean, we'll see. They obviously have the offensive weaponry to get hot, but the defense hasn't been able to stop anybody, and I don't know that Quinnen Williams is changing that. So they traded a deal to give up a 1st and a 2nd for a half of a year of him, and then whatever else happens. That's a lot for where they are right now. So to me, it wouldn't have made sense for Washington to go all in on some sort of a Sauce Gardner type trade, even though obviously he's very good. But this is why they're in this a bit of a limbo. On the one hand, they're still trying to upgrade the roster depth and the overall talent, but they've already traded away, picks to get that done. And so that's the thing is, like, next year they only have 2 picks in the first 4 rounds, and I get that, like, saying you're adding a very late round pick or upgrading there is not going to change the stat I just said, but that's all they can do on some level. You do what you can and move it forward incrementally, whatever it may be. But yeah, ultimately, sure, it would. Who knows what would have happened in the olden days, but I'm glad. Yes, if we were worried about them doing something overly aggressive like that and misreading the room, that would have been a problem.
Yeah, I just man, when I look at trade stuff, and I've always loved it in basketball because one player makes a hell of a difference. And we can look at it in this deal here. If we had tried to get somebody, will it make a difference this year? And cool, it might not make a difference next year, to be honest with you. But if you were to try to trade away some of your pieces to get other stuff, we've already seen you're going to probably end up with 5th, 6th round, 7th round pick, and probably not even a 5th, 6th and 7th round type stuff. And where has it really bolstered this team? Everybody think, you get a guy who shine for a little bit. Where has it really bolstered this team in the last 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, they're in an interesting spot, man. And I think the trade I don't know what Dallas is doing. Quentin Williams helps them, and you do have him for 2 years. I do think yesterday's movement or lack of movement asked some questions about what's on Washington's roster. But, a lot of that die has been cast. I think at this point, 10 weeks in, there's real questions about how they handled that this offseason. Yeah. But they still, at the same time, have 8 games to play, right? Ben, what do you think? Detroit coming to town. Everybody knows what happened last year in the divisional round. Now Detroit just lost at home to the Vikings. Looking to the actual football game on the field this week, what do you see? Mariota at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've come down the last 2 games, going into the Chiefs game and then certainly this last game, was that, I think we can kind of dispense with, hey, they need to find a way to improve the run game, or, hey, they got to stop allowing big plays on defense. Not that those things aren't important, but they're at a stage right now where for them to win, the other team needs to be bad. And Washington may have some influence on that, but not necessarily. Like the Kansas City game, right? The Chiefs have turnovers in their first 2 drives, and one of them was a really nice play by Marshawn Lattimore. The other one was the tip ball off of Kelsey. But either way, the Chiefs were moving the ball. It's not like they forced a punt or anything. They just, were fortunate to get those turnovers. Seattle had none of that. And so, if the other team comes out hot, I don't think they have a chance right now, which is, and I was saying that last week before Jaden got hurt, unfortunately. They're just in a tough spot in defense. They're not worried about their offense making plays down the field. And defensively, I think the defensive end injuries have just cratered what was potentially working for this defense because they've had to move a lot of guys around. So not to not to be like the total bummer, but unless Detroit comes out and for whatever the reason, like last year in the playoffs, right? They committed 5 turnovers. If they do something along those lines, then sure. If Washington takes advantage of it, they can be successful. Other than that, boy, I just don't see what they're going to do to get this to work. If you're putting it on Mariota's shoulders, I mean, that's not great. And it's not like we can sit here and say the defense is going to buck up and slow them down. So if you're looking for a win, I think you just have to hope that Detroit is not firing on all cylinders, as they say, more than that Washington is going to have some massive improvement, because I don't know that that's coming anytime soon.
Yeah, I just think I think the defense gets all the blame, but the offense has not been what it was last year too, where they had the long drives, they got some touchdowns, they took time off the clock. This year hadn't been that way, so just them doing it, being a little better, may help the defense out a little bit. I don't know.
You know what's crazy is that we talk about this offense that kind of like it's a carryover from last year, largely because Jaden Daniels is here and Cliff Kingsbury stayed. Their top receivers from last year, and now a couple of them were because of injuries, none of them are going to play this week. Every single one of their top receivers from last year is either on another team or hurt, and their top 2 running backs from last year are also hurt or not here. Now, I'm not saying that they were necessarily wrong to let any of those people go, but there's no carryover almost from last year to this year. Jaden is, especially with Terry being in and out of the lineup, he's been working with completely new players. And, a lot of what went on last year, again, nobody was sitting there thinking that beyond Terry McLaurin, they had, Ricky Sanders and Gary Clark, but they had players who were effective in specific roles that they took advantage of. Diami down the field, Zacchaeus' versatility, Noah Brown, can making some plays in the air, and they found ways to maximize those strengths. The problem I had with the receiver room this year is, they just didn't have the depth. This to me had no specific strengths to it, and then when you needed them, which was quickly, they just didn't offer anything that you could, really work with, or at least they didn't find a way to work with it, and then that just took the whole operation down because the defenses are just like, we're just going to stack the line, take away the run, clog the short passing lanes where maybe Zach Ertz wants to be, and force you to throw the ball down the field, and we don't think you're going to do it successfully. So, the receiver room is just, the fact that almost all the skilled players from last year are gone or hurt is, pretty wild.
One word answer, Benny. Do we see Jaden again this year on the field?
No.
Okay. There you have it. Everybody check.
I don't know that. I'm just throwing it out there.
None of us know. None of us know, but it's an interesting situation because they didn't put him on IR. They got 2 games and a bye week. It's an interesting thing. Everybody check out the Last Man Standig Substack and podcast. Thanks for the time, Benny.
All right, Ben.
Always, man. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's our boy Ben Standig, BCC alum. Go Barons. Give him a follow at Ben Standig, joining us via the Rude Guest Hotline.